The stars were silent that night. The endless black of space stretched on forever, cold and empty. A single human pilot drifted through the void, his small ship humming softly as it cut across the darkness. He was alone, far away from Earth, carrying supplies to a distant station. For him, it was just another journey, another night in the endless sea of stars. But then, the silence broke. At first, it was only a crackle of static in his headset. Nothing unusual. He frowned and tapped the control panel, thinking it was just interference. Space often played tricks on signals. But then, through the broken static, he heard something strange. A voice. It was faint, almost like a whisper carried on the wind. He leaned closer to the receiver, unsure if his ears were tricking him. The voice came again, soft, trembling, and filled with fear. "Human, please, save my mother." His heart skipped a beat. He froze, staring at the console. The voice was not human. It was higher, melodic, almost musical, but heavy with pain. The words were clear, but the tone was not of Earth. He turned the dials, trying to catch the frequency again. The voice repeated, more desperate this time. "Human, please save my mother." He sat back in his chair, trying to calm his racing thoughts. This was impossible. Out here, alone in the deep of space, there should be no one else. Yet the voice was real, and it was calling him. His hands hovered over the controls. He had two choices: ignore it and continue his journey, or follow the signal into the unknown. He adjusted his scanners. The signal was weak, broken, as if it came from far away or through heavy interference. A red dot blinked faintly on the screen, far off his route. He hesitated. His orders were simple: deliver the cargo, return home. Nothing more. But his curiosity was stronger. He felt something deep inside, something human, pulling him toward the voice. "Human. Hurry!" the voice cried again. And then more chilling words followed. "They are coming." His chest tightened. Who were they? What danger was chasing this voice? He set a new course, his ship changing direction. The engines hummed louder, pushing him toward the source. The darkness outside seemed heavier now, pressing against the glass of his cockpit. Time passed slowly as he moved closer, the signal growing clearer but still broken. Then, through the viewport, he saw it, a faint glimmer of metal drifting in the shadows. He slowed his ship, careful, cautious. It was not a station, not a ship he recognized. It looked small, broken, like a pod lost in space. Sparks flashed weakly from its surface, pieces of metal floating around it like debris from a wreck. He guided his ship closer and switched on the external lights. The beam of white revealed the damage more clearly. The pod was cracked, dented, barely holding together. But inside, through the shattered glass, he saw movement. A figure, his breath caught. It was a girl. Not a human girl, but something different, something alien. Her skin was pale with a faint glow, as if lit from within. Her eyes shone brightly, wide with fear, but also filled with hope as she looked toward his ship. She pressed her hand weakly against the glass. The communication device on his console crackled again. The same voice, now stronger, came through. "Please, human." "My mother, she is still trapped." He leaned forward, his eyes locked on her. She looked so fragile, so young, and yet her voice carried a weight that pierced his chest. He had no idea who she was or where she came from, but her plea was real. He activated the docking arms, securing the broken pod to his ship. With a hiss of air, the small airlock opened, and he pulled the alien girl inside. She collapsed onto the floor, weak but alive, her chest rising and falling rapidly. She looked at him, her glowing eyes filled with tears. "Please," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Save my mother." Before he could respond, his sensors screamed. A sharp alarm filled the cabin. He turned quickly to the screen. Multiple signals appeared, moving fast, closing in on their position. His heart pounded. Whoever they were, they had arrived. He looked back at the girl. She shook her head slowly, fear shining in her eyes. "Too late," she whispered. The ship trembled as a shadow passed over the viewport. Something massive was out there, something hunting them. The human gripped the controls, his pulse racing. The cry in the dark had led him to her, but now he realized it had also led danger straight to him. And in that moment he knew. This was only the beginning. The ship shook again as the shadow passed outside. The alarm screamed warning of danger. The human pilot's hands moved quickly across the controls, trying to steady the vessel. His eyes flicked to the sensors. The strange signals were getting closer. 3, maybe 4 ships closing in fast. Whoever they were hunting the pod. He glanced at the girl lying on the floor. She was weak, her chest rising and falling as if every breath was heavy. Her glowing eyes stared at him wide with fear. Her lips moved, forming the same desperate words again. "Save my mother. Who's chasing you?" the human asked, his voice low but urgent. The girl shook her head. She tried to speak but coughed instead. He knelt down, supporting her as she struggled to sit upright. Her skin was cold, faint light pulsing beneath it as though her body was alive with hidden energy. She looked fragile, like glass about to break, but her eyes burned with determination. "They will find us," she whispered. "We must run." The human tightened his grip on the controls. His cargo mission was no longer important. Something bigger was happening here. He pushed the thrusters, sending the ship into a sharp turn. The stars streaked past as the ship accelerated away from the approaching hunters. For a moment, the alarms quieted. But the signals kept chasing. "Who are they?" he asked again, louder this time. The girl closed her eyes, whispering as if her words themselves carried weight. "They are destroyers. They come to break. They captured my mother. I escaped." Her voice trembled, then steadied. "But they will never stop. They hunt until all is gone." The human felt a chill crawl across his skin. This was no simple accident. She wasn't just lost, she was being hunted. He stole a glance at her again, at the tears glowing faintly on her cheeks. She was young, maybe the age of a teenager in human years, yet her words carried the sorrow of someone much older. Suddenly, the ship jolted. A flash of light streaked across the viewport. A shot, one of the hunters had fired. The blast grazed the side of the hull, shaking the cabin. Warning lights turned red. "Hold on," the human shouted, gripping the controls with both hands. He pushed the engines to maximum, weaving through the darkness. The hunters followed, their weapons flashing like angry stars. The girl held onto the seat, her face pale, her eyes wide but unblinking. For minutes it was a deadly chase. Every movement he made was the difference between life and death. His heart pounded, sweat beading on his forehead. But at last he spotted a dense field of broken rocks ahead, asteroid debris scattered like a graveyard of stone. Perfect for hiding. He dived into the field, guiding the ship through narrow gaps between spinning rocks. The hunters followed, but the debris forced them to slow. The human cut the engines and killed the lights, drifting silently into the shadows of a massive asteroid. The ship went dark, hiding like a ghost. The girl's breathing slowed as the silence returned. For a long moment, neither spoke. The only sound was the faint hum of life support and the distant echo of rocks colliding outside. Finally, the human turned to her. "Who are you?" She looked at him, her glowing eyes shining like tiny stars in the dim light. "My name is Lyra," she whispered. "I come from a world far from here, a world of light, a world of peace. But now it burns." Her voice cracked, and for the first time he saw her pain break through the strength she tried to hold. The human leaned back, his mind racing. A young alien girl, hunted across space, begging for him to save her mother. It sounded impossible, yet here she was, alive and real in front of him. "Why me?" he asked. "Why call a human? Why not your own people?" Lyra's eyes softened, sadness filling them. "Because only a human can pass their gates. The destroyer's machines. They know us. They reject us, but you can walk where I cannot." The words hung in the air like a heavy weight. He felt the truth in them, even if he didn't understand it fully. Something about him, about humans, was different. And that difference might be the only hope she had left. Before he could answer, the sensors beeped again. The hunters were still searching, their signal sweeping through the asteroid field. They had not given up. Time was running out. Lyra reached out with a trembling hand, gripping his arm. Her touch was cold, but her eyes burned with fire. "Please," she whispered again, almost breaking. "Save my mother. If she falls, my people are lost forever." The human swallowed hard. He had started this journey as a simple pilot, a man carrying supplies through empty space. Now he was staring into the eyes of a girl whose entire world depended on him. Outside, the hunters drew closer. The ship trembled as another blast shook the asteroid nearby, sending debris crashing into the darkness. The human's jaw tightened. He gripped the controls again, determination hardening inside him. He didn't know how, he didn't know why, but one thing was certain. He couldn't walk away. The cry of the alien girl was now his mission, and the battle for her mother had only just begun. The asteroid field was quiet, but the human pilot knew it was only a fragile silence. Outside, the hunters still searched, their signals sweeping like invisible nets across the darkness. His ship drifted in the shadow of a massive rock, the engines cold, the lights off, every system whispering quietly to avoid detection. Inside the cabin, Lyra sat curled in the seat beside him. Her pale skin glowed faintly in the dim light, her eyes shining with a mix of fear and determination. She didn't move much, but her gaze never left the scanner. Every beep of the system made her tense, as if she expected death to appear at any second. The human glanced at her. He wanted answers. He needed them. He lowered his voice so it would not shake. "Tell me who they are. Who's chasing us?" Lyra's lips pressed together. For a long moment she did not speak. Then she whispered, "They are the Krail, shadows of the stars. They conquer worlds, strip them, leave nothing but ash. They came for my people and they took my mother." Her voice cracked on the last word, but she forced herself to continue. "The Krail believe that if they control her, they control us. She is more than a mother to me, she is our queen. She holds the bond to all of us. Without her, we are broken." The human felt the weight of her words sink into him. It was no longer just about saving one life. It was about saving an entire people, and somehow, for reasons he still did not understand, she believed only a human could do it. He leaned forward, scanning the asteroid field again. The signals were closer now, creeping toward their hiding place. He gritted his teeth. "If they find us, we're finished. I can't fight an army." Lyra's glowing eyes turned to him. "You don't have to fight an army. You only have to reach her. The rest will follow." The words gave no comfort. But before he could reply, the ship trembled. A flash of light seared past the viewport, striking an asteroid nearby. The rock shattered into fragments, tumbling through space. "They found us," he shouted. The scanners lit up red. 3 hunter ships, sharp and angular, slid into view. Their hulls were black, blending with the void, only their glowing red eyes marking them as predators. They moved with deadly grace, circling like wolves around their prey. The human's hands flew across the controls. Engines roared back to life. He pushed the ship hard, weaving between spinning debris. Blasts streaked after him, each one shaking the hull. Lyra held on tight, her small frame trembling, but her eyes never closed. She watched, silent, as if her hope depended on his strength. One hunter swung close, its weapons glowing. The human pulled the ship into a sharp dive, skimming past a jagged asteroid. The enemy's shot missed by inches, exploding in a burst of light behind them. He pushed harder, his ship rattling under the strain. "Hold together," he muttered to the vessel, as if speaking to a loyal friend. "Just a little longer." Lyra suddenly gasped. Her eyes widened, her voice sharp. "They will not stop. They know you are here now. They know what you carry. What do I carry?" He snapped, ducking the ship beneath a tumbling boulder. Her gaze met his. "Me, and through me, hope." Her words struck him harder than any blast. He didn't want to be anyone's hope. He was just a pilot, a man who wanted to finish his route and go home. Yet here he was, flying through death because he couldn't ignore her cry. The hunters pressed closer. One surged ahead, cutting him off. Its weapons glowed bright. There was no room to dodge. The human's instincts screamed. He yanked the ship sideways, scraping so close to an asteroid that sparks lit the hull. The hunter fired, but the shot struck the rock instead, blasting it into fragments that tore through the enemy ship's hull. The predator spun out of control, breaking apart in silence. "One down," the human muttered, his voice tight. But the victory was brief. The other two closed in, their movements sharper now, their intent colder. They were learning his tricks. He couldn't outrun them forever. Lyra leaned closer, her voice urgent. "There is a safe place nearby. A hidden path. I can guide you." He didn't hesitate. "Show me." Her glowing fingers traced across the console, marking a course between 2 enormous asteroids. To him it looked like a death trap, narrow, unstable, with rocks colliding in slow motion. But her eyes held certainty. "Trust me," she said softly. He took a deep breath and pushed the ship forward, diving into the narrow gap. The hunters followed, their weapons ready. The rocks shifted around them, groaning, breaking apart. It was a deadly maze, and only skill and luck would decide who survived. The human's hands were steady, his eyes sharp. Every second mattered, every turn was a brush with death. Lyra whispered coordinates, guiding him through the chaos. Behind them, the hunters struggled, their sleek ship scraping against stone. Finally, the path opened. A tunnel of light stretched ahead, leading out of the field. The human pushed the engines, bursting free into open space. For a heartbeat, relief filled the cabin. But then the scanners screamed again, more signals. Dozens this time. A whole fleet of hunters waiting beyond the field. Their shapes filled the stars, dark and endless. The human's chest tightened. This was no longer a chase. This was war, and now there was no turning back. The human's breath caught in his throat. The scanner glowed red with too many signals to count. Dozens of hunter ships spread out across the dark, their black hulls swallowing the stars. Their crimson eyes blinked in unison, a net tightening around his tiny vessel. For a moment, silence filled the cabin, heavy and suffocating. Lyra sat frozen beside him, her glowing eyes locked on the screen. Her small hands clenched tightly, her voice breaking into a whisper. They brought the fleet. The human's pulse thundered in his ears. He knew his ship could never outfight, never outrun so many enemies. He turned to Lyra, his voice sharp. If you know a way out, tell me now. Her gaze snapped to him, fire sparking in her trembling voice. There is one path, but it is dangerous, very dangerous. More dangerous than staying here? He shot back. Lyra said nothing. She leaned forward, her glowing fingers dancing across the console. A hidden coordinate flashed on the screen, a sector uncharted in human maps. There, she said. A rift in the stars. If we pass through, they cannot follow. Their machines fear it. The human frowned. Why? Her answer was simple. Because it is alive. Before he could question her, the hunters moved. Red light streaked across the void as blasts tore past the ship. The cabin rattled, alarms screaming. The human gritted his teeth, shoving the thrusters to maximum. The vessel roared forward, cutting toward the strange path Lyra had marked. The hunters followed, their shots slicing closer, each one nearly fatal. He swerved hard, spinning between them, but for every ship he dodged, two more closed in. The rift shimmered faintly ahead like a ripple in space, glowing with colors his eyes could barely comprehend. What is that? He asked. The veil, Lyra whispered. A secret of my people. It protects us. It will protect you too. The ship groaned under the strain as he drove straight into the shifting light. For a heartbeat, everything was still. Then the world twisted. Colors exploded, bending and breaking. The cabin shook violently, his vision blurring. Space itself seemed to fold, twisting into endless tunnels of light. He gripped the controls, fighting to keep the ship steady. Lyra's hands clung to the seat, but her eyes glowed brighter, as if the strange place gave her strength. Behind them, the hunters tried to follow. One entered the rift, its dark hull tearing against the living light. The ship screamed as if alive, ripped apart in silence, its pieces vanishing into nothing. The other hunters halted at the edge, their red eyes burning, but none dared to enter. The human ship tumbled forward until finally, the shaking stopped. The light faded, replaced by quiet darkness once again. The scanners were clear. The hunters were gone. The human slumped back in his chair, breathing hard. Sweat dripped down his face. For the first time since meeting Lyra, they were safe. He turned to her, his voice sharp but low. Now tell me the truth. No more riddles. Who is your mother? Why are they after her? Lyra sat still, her glowing eyes shimmering like stars about to break. Slowly she spoke. My mother is not only my mother. She is the heart of my people. She is our queen. Through her, we are connected. Her voice is our strength. Her bond keeps us whole. Her words sank deep, heavy with meaning. The human's chest tightened. And if they take her? Lyra's voice trembled. Then we fall. Without her, my people will lose themselves. They will obey the Krail. They will become slaves forever. The human felt the weight of her pain. He saw it in her tears, glowing faintly on her cheeks. She wasn't just begging for her mother's life, she was begging for her entire race. Why me? He asked quietly. Why call a human? Why not your own? Lyra shook her head. Because humans are different. Your blood, your mind, it is unknown to their machines. Where we cannot step, you can. Where we are locked out, you can walk. My mother knew this. That is why she sent the signal. That is why she called you. The human leaned back, his hands trembling slightly. He had left Earth as just a pilot, an ordinary man carrying cargo through the void. But now he was being asked to walk into the heart of an enemy empire, to rescue a queen who was the soul of an entire species. The silence stretched until a sound broke it, a faint crackle from the console. A new signal. Weak, broken, but real. The human leaned forward. The voice was faint, tired, but filled with a soft, commanding strength. Find me. Before they break me. Lyra gasped, her hands covering her mouth. Mother! The human stared at the screen. The voice was unlike Lyra's. Older, deeper, but filled with the same shimmering tone. His heart pounded. This was no longer just Lyra's plea. This was the Queen herself reaching across the void, calling him. He closed his eyes for a moment, then opened them with resolve. Then we'll find her. Whatever it takes. But as the words left his mouth, the scanners flickered again. A faint signal. Not the hunters, not yet, but something else. Something moving in the rift with them. Lyra's eyes widened. No, she whispered. It followed us. The human's hand froze on the controls. The chase was not over. The shadows had found a way inside, and the true battle was about to begin. The ship floated in the strange rift, wrapped in colors that pulsed like living light. The scanners blinked faintly, warning of something moving in the shadows with them. The human pilot gripped the controls, his jaw tight. He had escaped the hunters, but only barely. And now something else, something unknown, was following. Beside him, Lyra sat stiffly, her glowing eyes wide with fear. Her hands trembled, clinging to the edge of the seat. She whispered almost to herself, they should not be here. Nothing should follow us into the veil. The human forced himself to stay calm. His voice was steady, though his heart pounded. Then whatever it is, it's not giving up. Silence filled the cabin, heavy and suffocating. The faint hum of the ship's system seemed louder than ever. For a moment he thought of turning back, thought of returning to his old route to Earth, to safety. After all, he had never asked for this. He was just a man, a pilot, not a soldier, not a hero. He looked at Lyra. Her face was pale, her glowing tears streaking down like tiny stars. She looked small, fragile, like a child lost in the dark. Yet her eyes held something more, hope. A hope that rested on him. Why me? He muttered under his breath. Lyra heard him. She lifted her head slowly, her voice soft but steady. Because you answered. Many may have heard the signal. Many may have ignored it. But you came. You chose. Her words cut through him sharper than any blade. She was right. He could have ignored the cry, pretended it was nothing. But he hadn't. He had followed, and now there was no escaping the path he was on. He leaned back in his chair, staring at the shifting light of the veil outside the viewport. If I help you, he said slowly, I'll be hunted too. I'll be fighting enemies I can't even understand. Why should I risk everything? Lyra's glowing eyes locked onto his. For the first time her voice rose with raw emotion. Because my people cannot fight this alone. Because my mother is more than a queen, she is our heart. And because if the Krail take her, they will not stop with us. They will come for others. For humans too. For your home. Her words struck deep. He thought of Earth. The blue oceans, the cities shining with light, the people walking freely under the sun. Could these hunters, these Krail, one day turn their red eyes toward his own world? The cabin fell silent again. He closed his eyes, feeling the weight of choice pressing down on him. He could walk away now, leave Lyra to her fate and save his own life. Or he could step forward, into danger, into war for people who were not his own. When he opened his eyes again, the decision was already made. He straightened, his voice firm. I'll help you. We'll find your mother. We'll bring her back. Lyra gasped softly, her eyes glowing brighter. For the first time since he had found her, she smiled. A small, trembling smile, but filled with gratitude. Thank you, human. He turned back to the controls, but before he could speak, the scanners screamed again. A dark shape slid into view, moving like a shadow within the veil. It was not like the hunters he had faced before. This one was different. Larger, darker, its form bending the light around it. Lyra's voice trembled. A wraith. The human's brows furrowed. What is it? Her voice was barely a whisper. A weapon of the Krail, born from the shadows. It does not hunt ships. It hunts souls. A chill ran down his spine. He gripped the controls tighter, his heart pounding. The wraith glided closer, its shape twisting unnaturally like smoke and claws wrapped into one. The veil itself seemed to recoil from it, the living light dimming as it passed. The human's voice was steady, but inside, fear gnawed at him. Then we don't fight it. We run. He pushed the thrusters, the ship surging forward through the glowing tunnels of the veil. The wraith followed, silent, relentless, its form shifting like a nightmare that could never be outrun. The ship shook violently as the rift twisted ahead, pulling them in strange directions. The human wrestled with the controls, forcing the vessel through impossible turns. The wraith stayed behind them, always closer, always reaching. Lyra gripped his arm, her eyes blazing. If it touches us, we are lost. You must not let it reach us. I don't plan to, he growled. The chase tore through the veil, light and shadow colliding in ways that defied reality. Every second was a battle for survival. The wraith's claws of darkness stretched toward the ship, grazing the hull with a screech that shook the cabin. Then, just as despair began to rise, Lyra's eyes widened. She pointed ahead. There, the exit! A crack of light glowed faintly in the distance like a doorway back into real space. The human pushed the ship harder, every system screaming as the engines burned. The wraith surged forward, its form stretching, reaching for them. At the last moment, the ship burst through the crack of light, exploding out of the veil. Stars filled the viewport once more. The scanners cleared. The wraith was gone. The human slumped back, his chest heaving, sweat dripping down his face. For now, they were safe again. But as silence returned, Lyra's voice broke softly. Human, if you choose this path, there is no return. Once we reach her, the Krail will know you. They will never forget you. He turned to her, his eyes steady. Then let them remember. And in that moment, he was no longer just a pilot. He was something more. But far away in the shadows of the galaxy, the Krail Queenbreakers prepared. The war was already waiting for him. The human's ship drifted silently through the black sea of stars. The chase was over for now, but the air in the cabin was heavy with what lay ahead. Lyra sat beside him, her glowing eyes fixed on the navigation display. A single red marker blinked faintly at the edge of the map. That was their destination, the fortress of the Krail. It was not a world, not a moon, but something built in the dark void itself. As the ship drew closer, the human felt a weight pressing down on his chest. The scanners showed a massive structure, floating in orbit around a dead star. It was shaped like a claw stretching out to trap the light. Black towers rose from its surface and red fires burned within, casting shadows across the void. Lyra's voice was soft, almost trembling. That is where she is kept. The human stared at the monstrous fortress. It looked alive, as if the stone and metal itself hated all things that lived. His hands tightened on the controls. This was no ordinary mission. This was stepping into the heart of death. How do we get in? He asked. Lyra touched the console, marking a narrow point on the structure. There is a hidden path. An old servant of my mother told me of it. The Krail do not guard it well. They believe none are foolish enough to try. Then they don't know me, the human muttered. He guided the ship lower, into the shadow of the fortress. The hull creaked as he threaded between jagged towers of black stone. Strange lights moved across the surface, patrols sweeping the void. He shut down every unnecessary system, hiding in the dark, praying the hunter's sensors would not catch them. Lyra sat quietly, her small hands gripping the edge of the seat. She whispered a sound, a soft song in her own tongue. It was a fragile melody filled with sorrow, but it steadied her trembling heart. The human glanced at her, listening. Even in this place of death, her voice carried life. At last, the hidden path appeared. A narrow crack in the fortress wall, barely wide enough for his ship. He forced the vessel through, scraping against jagged stone. The hull groaned, but the ship made it inside. The passage opened into a cavern-like tunnel, lit by a sickly red glow. Strange machines hung from the walls, pulsing with alien energy. The human landed the ship on a ledge, cutting the engines. He stood, checking his weapon. An old human sidearm, small compared to the enemy's weapons, but it was all he had. Lyra rose slowly, her glowing eyes meeting his. This is as far as I can go, she whispered. Beyond this point, their machines will sense me. I will be caught, the human frowned. Then I go alone? She nodded. Only you can pass. Only you can reach her. Her voice cracked and she added softly, Please. Do not fail. He studied her for a moment. She looked fragile, frightened, yet there was something in her gaze. A desperate trust. He gave a single nod. I'll bring her back. With that, he stepped into the fortress. The air inside was cold and heavy, carrying the faint hum of machines. The walls were alive with strange patterns glowing faintly like veins. Shadows moved across the halls, guards, creatures twisted and armored, their red eyes burning. The human pressed himself against the wall, moving slowly, carefully. Every step was a risk. He slipped through corridors, ducking behind massive pillars, avoiding the glowing eyes of the patrols. His breath was steady, though his heart thundered in his chest. He was no soldier, no spy, but survival made him learn fast. At last he reached the inner chamber. The doors loomed high above him, covered in symbols he could not read. They opened with a low hiss as if breathing, and he slipped inside. The chamber was vast, lit by a strange white glow. At its center was a figure, chained in shimmering light. She was tall, graceful, her skin glowing brighter than Lyra's, her eyes closed in pain. Her presence filled the room with sorrow and strength all at once. The human knew immediately this was the queen, Lyra's mother. His breath caught. He took a step forward, but a sound stopped him. From the shadows of the chamber, a figure emerged. Tall, armored, its body sharp like black steel. Its red eyes locked onto him, glowing with cruel amusement. The creature's voice was deep, filled with mockery. A human, it hissed. So fragile, so weak, and yet you think you can free her? The human froze. He was not alone. The queen stirred, her eyes opening slightly, glowing with a soft light. Her voice, weak but steady, filled the chamber. Human, you came. The armored figure stepped closer, its claws scraping against the floor. Then you will die here, little creature, and your kind will follow. The human's hand tightened on his weapon. His pulse thundered, but his eyes stayed fixed on the enemy. He was inside the fortress now. The queen was before him, and death stood between them. This was the moment everything would change. The human stood frozen in the vast chamber, the queen chained at its center, and the armored figure blocking the way. The air felt heavy, every breath sharp in his chest. The enemy's red eyes glowed like burning coals, watching him with cruel amusement. So, the creature hissed, its voice echoing like steel against stone. This is the one they chose? A human, fragile, weak, short-lived. Do you think you can stand against the Krail? The human said nothing. He gripped his weapon tighter, feeling the weight of his choice pressing down on him. He wasn't a soldier, wasn't a hero, but he was here, and he would not leave without the queen. Behind the chains, the queen stirred. Her glowing eyes opened slowly, weak but filled with dignity. She looked at him, and for a moment it felt as if her gaze pierced through his very soul. Her voice was soft but steady, carrying strength even in pain. Human, do not fear. Your courage is greater than their cruelty. The armored Krail snarled, raising its clawed hand. Silence. Soon you will be nothing, and your daughter will join you in despair. The human's heart burned at those words. He thought of Lyra waiting in the ship, her hope resting on him. He thought of the desperate cry he had first heard in the dark. Please save my mother. That voice had brought him here, and he would not fail it. The Krail lunged. Its massive frame moved with deadly speed, claws slicing through the air. The human rolled to the side, the strike missing by inches. He raised his weapon and fired. Bolts of energy burst against the creature's armor, leaving only scorched marks. The Krail laughed, the sound deep and cruel. Your weapons are toys, it mocked. You cannot harm me. The human gritted his teeth, dodging another strike. He fired again and again, forcing the creature back, not with power but with determination. Every shot was a refusal, every step a declaration. He was not fighting to win, he was fighting to protect. The queen's voice echoed softly through the chamber. Human, listen. The Krail fear not your strength but your will. Stand and they will fall. The human's chest tightened. His weapon was failing, its energy running low, but her words lit a fire in him. He shouted, charging forward, slipping under the Krail's massive claw and striking at the exposed joints of its armor. Sparks flew. The creature roared in fury, slamming him back with a single blow. Pain shot through his body as he hit the floor. His vision blurred, blood trickling from his lip. The Krail towered over him, its shadow swallowing the light. Die, little human, it hissed, raising its claw for the final strike. But then, another voice pierced the chamber. Save my mother, Lyra's cry. The sound echoed in his mind, sharp and desperate. In that instant he saw her face, her glowing tears, her trembling hope. He remembered the cry in the dark, the moment he had chosen to follow. He could not stop here. He would not. With a surge of will, he rolled aside as the claw slammed into the floor, shattering stone. He rose to his feet, weapon shattered, but fists clenched. The Krail sneered. You stand with nothing. The human met its gaze, his voice hard. I stand with everything that matters. With a roar he charged. The battle became raw, brutal. He struck with all his strength, using speed and instinct, not power. The Krail swung wildly, frustrated that this fragile creature refused to fall. Blow after blow landed, sparks flying, cracks forming in its armor. At last, the queen raised her head. Her chains glowed, reacting to his defiance. Her voice rose like a song, weak but filled with command. Human. Now! The human grabbed a shard of broken metal from the floor, leapt forward and drove it into the glowing crack of the Krail's chest. The creature screamed, its voice shaking the chamber. Light burst from the wound, spilling out in burning streams. The Krail staggered, its claws flailing, then collapsed with a deafening crash. Silence followed, broken only by the sound of the human's ragged breath. He stumbled forward to the queen. Her glowing eyes softened. With the last of her strength, she raised her hand, touching his forehead gently. "You have done what none of us could," she whispered. "You carried the weight of hope. Humanity is stronger than we ever knew." The chains shattered, dissolving into light. The queen stood free, her form radiant, her presence filling the chamber with life again. Lyra rushed in, her eyes wide with tears. "Mother!" They embraced, light glowing brighter around them. The queen smiled at her daughter, then looked at the human. "You saved not only me but my people, and perhaps one day your own." The human bowed his head, exhausted but unbroken. He had come as a simple pilot, but he would leave as something else, someone remembered, someone feared by the Krail. Yet as the fortress shook, alarms rising, he knew this was not the end. The queen was free, but the enemy was vast, their armies endless. The war had only just begun.